Hey everybody, it's me, Minifigures and today, first of all, Merry Christmas! Today it's the 24th of December, which is the day we celebrate Christmas in Denmark, but if you live in a country where you celebrate it tomorrow, then, well, happy Christmas on tomorrow. So this video is of course about my Yule Ball minifigures, which I've actually wanted to make and been working on and off pretty much since I made my first Triwizard minifigures back in 2013. Many of these minifigures have therefore gone through many iterations, and I'm now finally at a point where I think they're showcase worthy. But without further ado, let's take a look at these minifigures. Starts to have feelings for the 5th-year student Cho Chang and wants to ask her to be his partner for the ball. What Harry doesn't realize is that she's actually dating his competitor in the tournament, Cedric Diggory. So you might wonder, why am I putting this minifigure in the showcase? There's not really any custom parts to him. Isn't this just a waste of a minifigure spot? I was thinking about making a more book-accurate version of his Yule Ball outfit, but I just didn't get time to do it before I had to make the video. For you, this means that there might be another Yule Ball minifigure video in the future. The torso for this guy came in a Lego Harry Potter book back in 2010, and this outfit has been exclusive to that book up until this point. And for a minifigure that just came in a book back in 2010, I think it's actually really good. There's some simple but effective back printing on him, which is really nice to see because we didn't even get that for most of the minifigures in the CMF series here in 2018, so it's really lovely to see that. And then of course I just used the medium short legs and the head and hair combination that I like. It's a simple little not so custom minifigure, but I don't want to talk too much about him, so let's move on to a very custom minifigure. Two actually. The Patil Twins, Padma and Pavati, went with Ronald Weasley and Harry Potter to the Yule Ball after Pavati accepted Harry's invitation. I'm making the twins share the spot in the showcase because they are actually completely identical. It's just the colors that are different, so that everything that's pink on Pavati is orange on Padma and vice versa. Now that you've seen both of them, I will mostly show Pavati. I'm sorry, Padma. This one is one of the OG Yule Ball minifigures that I've been working on for quite a while. The printing hasn't actually changed in the past 3 years or so, except when I decided to change it from the old 2x2 slope piece for the dress and instead use this new 2018 dress piece. Speaking of the dress piece, in my last video and in the beginning of this video, I've pretty much established that I'm using the medium short legs for my 4th year minifigures, but I couldn't really get that height with this new dress piece. If you think about it, had I made this video a year ago, I would have used that slope piece and just the normal legs, so the girls would have been one plate taller anyway, so it doesn't really change much, right? One of the things I also really love about this new skirt piece is that Lego actually prints on the back of them, and that means I can do it too, which is lovely. I think it just adds so much more to the minifigure that the printing also continues onto the dress on the back, which is something that they never did for the slope pieces. I did of course have to paint it because they haven't really made that many colors of this piece yet. I also had to paint the sleeves on the arms. For Pavati in particular, I had to paint the torso as well because the orange Posca pin I used for the arms didn't really match the official Lego orange. Fortunately, this wasn't necessary for Padma because the pink Posca pin that I have fits really well with the Lego pink, so I didn't have to do it there. The head I used for both of them came in a Star Wars Rebels set, I believe, and I just used the same for both of them, which is maybe a little more book accurate because in the movies they have 2 different actors playing the twins, but in the book it's described that they're identical twins, so now they're identical. I think these two turned out really well, especially with the paint and all. Ronald feels pretty lost when it comes to finding a partner, but then he realized, hey, my best friend is a girl. I can just ask her. Perfect. However, Hermione claims that she already has a partner. Ronald doesn't believe her, but he has to find another partner, of course. Okay guys, long have I been claiming that minifigures have been hard to make, saying how complicated and time-consuming they have been. Oh my sweet summer child, how naive I was. Nah, but for real, he was really tedious and difficult, but maybe not as much as I just made him out to be. I have, however, been through 3 renditions of this character already, and by God, am I glad I did not settle with any of those old ones, because they are, let's just say they're not really that good. The most challenging thing by far was those ruffles, both the red ones on the coat but also the white ones on the shirt. I had to use a lot of trial and error before I got something that I was actually satisfied with. The waistcoat has this nice pattern, which is pretty much the only thing that has been carried through for all my attempts at making this minifigure, because I think I pretty much nailed it the first time. You can see the waistcoat continues onto the hip part a little bit, and I didn't continue the printing for the coat onto the hip part because I have the waist cape going on top of the hip part anyway. Leaving that out just gives a little more dimensionality, I think, because you can actually see that it's behind the coat. Speaking of the waist cape, this time I printed on this nice pattern, and it was honestly really easy to make. I simply just used some paper you use to make custom t-shirts, and you just iron on the print. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get this pattern onto the arms. I tried it, but it just didn't really work, so I just stuck with just the ruffles on the arms, and that looks pretty good to me. The pattern is of course also on the torso itself, and is most noticeable on the back. This time I actually really like the bag. It is of course far simpler than the front printing, but the small details that I added looks really good. The head I used is the 2010 one, and then I used the hairpiece they use in the new sets. As I said in the review I did with Geert, I like pretty much all the heads and hair pieces that they've ever done for Ronald, so I can't really tell you my reasoning for going with this specific one other than that it just looks good. Hermione Granger's asked to the ball by Viktor Krum, but she doesn't tell her friends because she don't want them to make fun of her. So nobody knows this before the ball itself. This ends up causing a lot of heat between her and Ron. The printing for this minifigure is also approximately 2 years old at this point. I made all the front printing back in the beginning of 17, and the back printing I made just about a month ago. So it was actually kind of fun to have such a long break in between working on the minifigure, because it really distances you from the work, and you can see all the stuff that you might want to change, but you didn't see while working on it. So I can definitely recommend just leaving it for a little bit. This minifigure is a weird one to me because I can't really figure out whether I like it or not. The design itself I really like, but when I print it out and stick it onto the minifigure, there's just something a little off to me, and it might be the fact that there is no printing on the side of the dress piece, but that's just what Lego decided to do, so that's what I'm deciding to do. And honestly, it's not really the biggest deal. I again painted the arms, this time to simulate that cloth design that drapes over her shoulders. You can see a little bit of it here on the front, but you can see a lot more of it when we go to the back. And speaking of the back, this is a really interesting case, because on this minifigure, the back printing is pretty much just as good as the front printing. They have just about the same amount of detail, and my friend Geert even pointed out that he liked the back more than the front, so that's kind of interesting because the backs are often so blank. I chose to go with the newest face they made for her in the CMF series. I don't think there's as of yet a perfect head to use for Hermione. I just like different parts of all the heads that they've come up with. This new face has actually grown on me a lot, and I think I'll be sticking to it, at least for my Goblet of Fire minifigures. The hair is fittingly enough Belle's from one of the mini dolls in the Disney Princess series, and I just think it's really pretty and works on this minifigure. Viktor ends up asking Hermione to the ball after talking to her in the library a few times. Maybe it's just me, but isn't it kind of creepy that a foreign 18-year-old dude is stalking this 14-year-old girl? Maybe we're just not supposed to really think about it too much. Anyway, this guy is really pretty old at this point. I finished him and posted the first pictures on Flickr back in October of 2015, and the printing hasn't really changed ever since. I have made a few tweaks here and there, like the drum strength sigil on the belt. That is a new addition, but other than that, it hasn't really changed at all. I of course reprinted it with my new printer, and when you compare them, you can really see the difference that the new printer makes. It just is so much better. I wanted to use the dual molded legs for Han Solo that came out on the new Cloud City set, but those are just way too expensive on Bricklink at this point, so painted on boots does the job for now. I made printing on the side of the legs. It's just a red stripe going down and there's nothing else to it, but I just think it's really effective. It would have just looked so much more blank without it. If we turn to the back, it is unfortunately a bit lackluster, especially coming from Hermione and Ronald, who we just saw, but I mean, it's okay. Alright. Let's address the elephant in the room, which is of course the cape. This part was the one that I was most proud of back when I made it 3 years ago, and it's still my favorite part about the minifigure. Like with the waist cape on Ronald, it wasn't really difficult to do at all. This time I didn't use official Lego cloth, this time I just used some blank white fabric that I had laying around. It doesn't really matter if you use the official Lego cloth because it makes the cloth more rigid anyway. So there isn't really any more to talk about for this minifigure, so let's move on to the last one. Fleur Delacour rudely rejects Ron when he asks her to the ball, and instead ends up going with Roger Davis? To be fair, he is a Ravenclaw, so I can see her reasoning there, but other than that, Roger Davis? Well, this minifigure wasn't too hard to do, because the design is just so simple. The only real challenging thing to do was the flower design on her chest, and that wasn't even that difficult. I did pretty much exactly the same as I did for Hermione, meaning I made the front printing a few years ago and the back printing just a few months ago. But in this case, it was even easier because the front and the back look pretty much the same. It's not really any difference to it. I did make completely different flower patterns for the front and the back, but other than that, it's exactly the same. For this character, I had to paint the the hair as well, and this hairpiece was first introduced for the bride in the 7th collectible minifigure series. And even though I don't think you could really choose a hairpiece that would be any more accurate than this, unfortunately, for some reason it makes her look just a little bit too old in my opinion. Maybe that's also the expression on the face. I did just go with the same face I did in my last video, and maybe the expression was a little more fitting for that minifigure, but I didn't want to choose something else for this one. That would just have been weird. There isn't really anything else to this minifigure. Simple, yet nice. This was my 7th and last minifigure, so let's move on to some final remarks. As I mentioned in my last video, I'm currently in Australia, so I hope I'm having a good time. I obviously don't know because I made this video before I went there, but I can't imagine anything else. This will therefore be the last video in 2018, but I think it's been a pretty good comeback with 7 videos compared to only 1 back in 2017, so I think that's really damn good. Next year should be really awesome too. I have 5 more videos planned for this Goblet of Fire series, but other than that I don't really have anything specific planned. I just know that I want to practice more stop motion and get a lot better at that. And another thing I really want to do is make a series of minifigures from A Song of Ice and Fire, so I hope that some of you will be happy about that. And of course just, you know, more Harry Potter related stuff, obviously. But when exactly any of these things will come out, I don't know yet. But yeah, I'll be looking forward to making a lot more videos next year. Once again, Merry Christmas to everybody and have a Happy New Year. Lego 3x11L signing out.